What up? Today we're going to be looking at free agency so far, and I'm going to be grading each team on how they've done, how the signings have gone that they've made, um, and I'm going to give them all ratings and all that. But before we get started, I just want to say, channel's kind of blown up a little bit here lately. I really appreciate it. It's small still. I got like 36 subs, but that's like eight more than I had 2 days ago. I mean, and it took 3 weeks for it to get there, and now I've got eight in 2 days. I mean, it seems small, and there's one video that's really blown up, but I really appreciate anything and everything. This is something I want to do for a while, and so I do it for fun right now, but hopefully I can turn it into more than that. But that's all thanks to y'all. So thank you for everything that's happened so far. I really appreciate it. But um, also follow my Twitter; it'll be posted halfway through the video or so. But yeah, thank you. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first we got the Chicago Bears. So the Bears made a couple splash signings pretty early in free agency. They got T.J. Edwards from the Eagles, Tremaine Edmonds, both middle linebackers, which I thought was kind of interesting to get two of them. And then also Nate Davis, the guard from Tennessee. You know, pretty good signings. I think maybe they overpaid Tremaine Edmonds a little bit, but that's what you do whenever you have a bad roster and you have money and just spots to fill. You overpay guys that you just have to overpay. Um, so just in total, at these numbers, I think they're fine. I'll give them like a B plus. I mean, it's pretty good. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think any of these guys is like an elite player, a full standout, like top of the line A plus player. So the Bengals have re-signed Jermaine Pratt and also brought in Orlando Brown Jr. Orlando Brown is probably the most annoying tackle in the league at this point with his contracts. He wants to live up to his dad's legacy or something to make a bunch of money as a left tackle, and he's just not that good. I mean, he's fine, but he's not that good as a left tackle. He wants high end left tackle money. He turned down an offer from the Chiefs. The rumor is for 25 mil a year, and then goes to sign with the Bengals for 16 mil a year. I love it because it kind of shuts down his ego a little bit, probably. But yeah, so I'll give them like a. I mean, Orlando Brown. They needed the tackle. I think they'll get like a B minus because they brought in Orlando Brown. Yeah, they're going to trade Jonah Williams. So I mean, it's it's okay. I mean, Jonah Williams didn't have the best year, but they haven't really done too much. So B minus I think is fine enough for them. The Bills, they're bringing back Jordan Poyer, and they also brought in Connor McGovern from Dallas. McGovern is a decent player on the offensive line. I believe he got some rotational minutes, and they have filled in a lot for some health issues. They definitely have offensive line needs they need to fill. And then Jordan Poyer, not letting him leave in free agency is probably a huge deal. I mean, he's a little older, but 2 years, and it's not going to be that expensive. It'll probably be a little bit more money than maybe another team would have given him, but he's a pretty good player, so it's okay. But I'm going to give them a B minus as well. And, not too many splash moves. They didn't go crazy on anything, but like a good, solid offseason as it sits. The Broncos have invested a lot of money into their O line. They've got Mike McGlinchey on a 5-year deal and Ben Powers on a 4. Zach Allen and then Alex Singleton. Um, these signings I think are actually really good for them. Personally, they're not standout players necessarily. Like they're all just solid players, but I mean, the O line was a huge issue last year, and Russell Wilson needs some stability up front to do anything and come back to the Russell Wilson we once knew. So I think getting McGlinchey and Powers that's a huge help for him. And so that alone is going to push them to a B plus. And then they get Zach Allen. Maybe they paid him a little much, but he did show out a pretty good amount last year. And they lost Draymond Jones, so a good 1-for-1 swap. And then Alex Singleton, a guy they couldn't let leave. He had to stay. They had to make him stay. So yeah, I don't blame him at all. So with that said, I'm gonna give them a B plus for now. A's are gonna be hard to come by. You have to have a really good offseason for that. So I'm just gonna hold off with that. But a B plus, not bad at all. The Cleveland Browns have brought in Obo Okoronkwo, Dalvin Tomlinson. They brought back Ethan Pochich, and they signed Juan Thornhill. These are okay signings. I really like the signing of Dalvin Tomlinson. He's a really solid D tackle. They've needed some help on that interior part of their D line. And then Ethan Pochich was a solid player last year, so that's a good bring back. But Okoronkwo and Juan Thornhill, those are rotational guys. I mean, they might get some start here in Cleveland, but they're not in any type of elite anything. So with that said, I'm gonna give them just a regular a B, just a flat B. I mean, it's solid to bring in and bring back two guys that are really good, and then just filling out the roster. It's fine. The Buccaneers, Jamel Dean brought him back, and Levante David, and then they brought in Baker Mayfield. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna give them this one's tough. I'm gonna give them an A minus almost completely because of the Jamel Dean signing. They were able to bring him back when they really weren't expected to, and not to mention they didn't even end up paying him that much as he really was expected to get. And then you can just throw in, I mean, Levante David, he's probably gonna be a buck for life. And then Baker Mayfield, I'm a Baker Mayfield fan, I'll admit it, but he's definitely got some more left in him. I think he's not a top 10 quarterback, probably not top 15, but is he a top 32 quarterback, and should he be a starter in the NFL? Yeah, he should be. There's not 32 quarterbacks that are better than him right now. So bringing him in for just a year, but for only $4 million, that's a steal. That if they had to bring him in for 10, 12, 15 million, which is probably more of a fair number, I would say this would be a B plus signing off season, maybe a B, but because of that deal and then the Jamel Dean re-signing, that's an A minus to me. That's an A minus for sure. So the Arizona Cardinals, they brought in Kaiser White and they brought back Will Hernandez. Not really much. They lost Byron Murphy. They lost Zach Allen. Honestly, this is like a C minus offseason for them. They needed the linebacker. They brought back Will Hernandez, who's been solid as a guard, but that's just not a whole lot of movement there. Not much to be happy about. The Chargers they bring back Morgan Fox and Trey Pipkins, and they also brought in Eric Kendricks. I'm gonna give them a B minus just because Trey Pipkins did come out last camp and he won the starting job at the right tackle position, which is great for him. He was solid, so he got paid a little bit. And then Morgan Fox has been a solid rotational player, but Eric Kendricks on the tail end of his career, I think that's a pretty good number for him. Honestly, he's still gonna have that All Pro level linebacker mentality and that just IQ, so you're always gonna have that from him. But they needed linebacker anyways, and they lost Drew Tranquill, and so not a bad signing at all. So I'm gonna give this one just like a B minus. I think it's fine. They brought in some guys that they probably, Trey Pipkins, they needed to keep him. There wasn't much out there on the market that they could replace him with, and for that number 7 a year, that's pretty solid. So B minus, I'll say, because of the Pipkins re-signing and mainly the Eric Kendricks addition. The Kansas City Chiefs brought in Mike Edwards, Charles Omenihu, and Jawan Taylor. Mike Edwards is a fine signing, 1 year, $3 million. I'm not upset about that at all for them. Jawan Taylor, personally, that's a bit of an overpay. He had a really good year last year, but I mean, that's $20 million a year when a guy like Orlando Brown Jr., who isn't great but is solid, he's consistently solid, he only got $16 million a year. And then Charles Omenihu, I actually think he's probably the best signing here. He's not a great player, but in terms of just need on their team, that's a huge add. He had some splash plays last year for the 49ers. They just cut Frank Clark, and that's why I think that's a really important signing. They had to have somebody to replace Frank Clark, and Charles Omenihu can do that for sure. Jawan Taylor's good, but he's not an amazing tackle. He's just solid. So it might be a stretch of an overpay there. So I'm gonna give them just a B minus. It's not bad. They did fill some needs, some heavy needs, but that's just can be a little iffy there with the overpays and The Colts brought in Taven Bryan, Samson Ebukam, and Gardner Minshew. Taven Bryan's fine, that's kind of just a depth add. Samson Ebukam he's a decent add, I think. They really needed somebody on the other side of their edge rush from Kwity Paye, and he can bring that. They paid him pretty well. I think it's a pretty fair deal. So, he's not the best edge rusher, but he's definitely a solid one, and so I don't mind them there. And then Gardner Minshew, actually, I don't. It's not the craziest signing, but I think it's pretty solid. Minshew's proven to be a solid quarterback, backup quarterback in the NFL, and they don't really have a route for their quarterbacks right now. I'm assuming they're going to take one in the draft. So Gardner Minshew, giving them some insurance on that, is I think a pretty solid move just to solidify that group as a whole. But with that said, I'm gonna give them like a C plus maybe. Nothing crazy. I'll give them a C plus for the fact that they needed Ebukam and they also just needed a warm body in that quarterback room that has some experience. So the Commanders, they brought in Andrew Wiley from the Chiefs, Jacoby Brissett, Nick Gates, and then they brought back Daron Payne. Daron Payne is a huge Like that is something they really needed. They did that, and that's I mean it's a pretty expensive deal, but it's probably well worth it. So it's like 22 mil a year or something like that, and some change, but well worth it. He's still pretty young, so keeping him around for a long time, solidifying that defense still. Nick Gates and Andrew Wiley. Neither of them are like elite offensive linemen, but they're both very solid. Nick Gates actually had some injury troubles, some pretty serious injury troubles a couple years ago, but he's recovered and come back. And Wiley kind of stepped up last year for the Chiefs, and he's been definitely a solid player, but he's not an elite tackle by any means. But overall, not a bad move. Jacoby Brissett, the addition to him, they said they're going with Sam Howell this year, and Sam Howell is a fine quarterback. He's, I think he came into the draft last year. I liked him better than Matt Corral, and so maybe if they're going to work with him, Jacoby Brissett at least gives them some insurance as well, kind of like Indianapolis with Gardner Minshew. So, with that said, I'm going to give them a B plus. Just the signing, solidifying their O line for whatever quarterback they have playing, and then bringing back Daron Payne is really good moves in my opinion. So, B plus for them. The Cowboys were able to trade for Stephon Gilmore, Leighton Vander Esch, and Donovan Wilson. They brought him back. Donovan Wilson and Van Der Esch are solid players on their defense. Donovan Wilson did a lot of stuff for them last year. Him and Jaron Kearse were their two starting safeties. And then Stephon Gilmore, they brought him in. Yes, he's not a free agency signing, but traded for him from the Colts. They get 1 year out of him. He had a good year last year. He is a little older, but, it's a 1 year deal. You're not spending a whole lot in total, and you get to go out here and get another guy by Trayvon Diggs to really lock up that secondary. This is a solid offseason for them so far. I don't think they're necessarily elite moves, but I'll give them a B at least. A B is pretty good, getting their depth back, keeping it around, and then also trading for a guy like Stephon Gilmore who can play a number 2 corner at the best level. The Miami Dolphins, once again, they traded as well for Jalen Ramsey. They signed David Long and Mike White, and they brought back Raheem Mostert. We'll start with the Jalen Ramsey part. That is a really solid signing. He's going to come in as probably CB2 behind Xavier Howard just because Howard's been around. And I mean, he looked pretty rough last year, but he's still young enough. I don't think that he's necessarily done with his career yet. I don't think he's necessarily washed. He has to prove it, but I don't think he's just done for and gone. Then David Long, he was, a pretty standout player for the Titans last year. Really good coverage linebacker, which is just not a normal thing necessarily. Bringing him in, solidifying that defense, that's a huge deal. And then they get Jets legend Mike White, the Mike White of all things. They're going to have Tua. Tua's going to be their guy, but Mike White coming in being a backup, he's another guy who's just a really solid backup, gives them good insurance policy on that. Because Teddy Bridgewater can't stay healthy either. And then Raheem Mostert had a really good year last year. He's already like 31, 32, maybe 33. I don't even know anymore. But he's old. But, I mean, his type of player always intrigues me. When you predicate your game really heavily on your speed, typically you end up having a shorter career because speed is one of the first things to go when you start aging. But Raheem Mostert's sticking around. So I don't know what he's doing, what his training regimen is, but it's working. So, overall, I think this is a really good offseason, especially what they traded to get Jalen Ramsey. I think it was a third and a Hunter Long, so not a whole lot. So honestly, they're going to get an A. David Long, Jalen Ramsey, and Raheem Mostert alone gives them an A. And I mean, Mike White, don't get me wrong, solid signing, good backup, but yeah, they definitely made some good improvements this year. The Eagles, this one's going to be a tough one because they had to lose a lot of guys. TJ Edwards, Javon Hargrave, CJ Gardner Johnson is still on the market, I believe. But they did bring back James Bradbury. They brought back Jason Kelsey. They released and then brought back Darius Slay. And honestly, those 3 things are huge. Jason Kelsey is the best center in the NFL. James Bradbury, for all statistical means, was the best corner in the NFL last year. And then Darius Slay is Darius Slay. James Bradbury, that is a good number for him, in my opinion. You're only paying him like, what, is that a little over 12 a year? That's not bad at all. He's like 28, 29, so he's got a little time left as well. Jason Kelsey, I don't need to talk anymore about that. Then they also bring in Marcus Mariota, Rashad Penny, and Greedy Williams. Greedy Williams is a good signing, in my opinion, because he's a young corner, and they have a lot of time they can use with him. get him under James Bradberry and Darius Slay and really develop him where Cleveland wasn't able to. Um, that probably means that they're not going to take cornerback at number 10 anymore, which is something I've been basing all my mock drafts on. They still could for sure. I mean, they might just want to use these corners they have now and gear up for the future with some youth behind them. But I think they still have Avonte Maddox too, so there's not really much need for that. And then Rashad Penny, that is a steal of a deal. He can't stay healthy, but when he's on the field, I mean, he's a stud running back. And for only $1.5 million, like that's a great deal for them. They lost Miles Sanders, but this offensive line and the offense as a whole is so good that it doesn't matter who's back there. As long as they've got some burst, they're going to be good. And Rashad Penny will be a great fit, I think. Marcus Mariota, I really like this signing as well. He gives them some more insurance as well. A lot of backup quarterbacks gone. But I think he fits a little bit more the Jalen Hurts role than Gardner Minshew did. So that can help them a lot if Jalen Hurts has some time out. So with that said, I'm going to give them a B+. They're fine. Bringing back Darius Slay when it looked like he was gone for a minute there, that's a big one, and that really saved them. They had a lot of guys who left in free agency, so it's not entirely their fault. But for what they had and what they've done with it, that deserves probably a B or B+. The Atlanta Falcons brought in Caden Ellis, Taylor Heineke, Marcus Davenport, and Jesse Bates, and they re-signed Caleb McGarry. Starting with Jesse Bates, that I don't think he's the best safety in the league, but he's definitely up there. But 4 years, $16 million, pretty solid deal. It's a little for safety. That's a pretty high number, but it's a solid player nonetheless, and they need it. And they're like the Bears. They have a bad roster, and when you have a bad roster and you have cap space and you need to fill out holes on your team, you have to pay more. That's what it's going to be. You just have to pay more. That's David Onyemata. Did I just say Marcus Davenport? I don't know what I said, but if I said Marcus Davenport, I didn't say that. But Caden Ellis and David Onyemata are two guys from a division rival they brought in, and they were both really solid players on the Saints defense last year. Onyemata's a little older. I'm kind of surprised he got that much money, but once again, when you have major needs on your defense or on your team anywhere, and you have cap space and you have to fill holes, you overpay guys. Caden Ellis was a linebacker who really jumped out last year. Wasn't much before the season and kind of took over in that role next to Demario Davis. So solid signing there as well. And then Taylor Heineke, he is a baller. He is going to come in. They say they're going to stick with Desmond Ridder, but if Taylor Heineke starts playing well, like Taylor Heineke does in camp and in the preseason games and throughout the early season, he might get some time. Heineke, I don't know how to rank him in terms of the best quarterbacks in the NFL because he's just a gamer. I feel like he plays to the level that he has to keep a job, which is incredible, honestly. So 2 years for $7 million a year. I mean, that's not bad at all. I really think that's a good deal for a backup or a rotational starter if they have to. And then Caleb McGarry, re-signing him, another tackle who really jumped out this last season. I think that's a great number to bring him back at. I mean, that's not a whole lot, and he's not too old, so that's a solid number for him to just stick around and you not have to worry about that position for a while and not pay him too much either. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and give them a B+. I'll give them an A- because Jesse Bates, good signing, and they really stirred up every level of that defense with Onyemata on the front, Caden Ellis in the middle, and then Jesse Bates on the back. And then McGarry and Heineke are two solid signings and re-signings. So, an A- will be good for them. The 49ers brought in Javon Hargrave and then Sam Darnold. Javon Hargrave was a huge get for them. They already have such a great defensive line, and front seven, including Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. But now they have a guy who had, 12 sacks last year at the defensive tackle position. So that's absurd. That's going to be a nightmare for opposing teams. And then Sam Darnold really came around at the end of last season. He's still only 25 years old. He seems like he should be 28. It's because he was in that class with Baker Mayfield, and Baker's like 28, or 27 or something. But Sam Darnold came in really young, and he's only 25. He's going to be 26 when the season starts, but that's so young for a quarterback still. And Kyle Shanahan's offense has proven to be more than quarterback friendly. A guy like Brock Purdy, who was a nobody before the draft, came in and won how many games in a row? And then you really think Sam Darnold can't come in and win some games? I think Sam Darnold probably wins that spot if the room stays like it is. I think he's good enough, and especially in an offense where Kyle Shanahan's going to be able to cater to whoever's needs. I think he wins the job over Brock Purdy and Trey Lance outright. I think he's going to end up being that good. Now, he's shown a lot of inconsistency, so maybe he plays for a while and then gets benched, but I think he definitely could show up and really take some glances from the 49ers locker room. That said, they're getting an A. Javon Hargrave's a great signing, and once again, Sam Darnold bringing him in a such a quarterback friendly offense. I think he just raises the floor of the room a little bit. I mean, which is weird to say, but he has the talent if he can just learn to use it. And a guy like Kyle Shanahan's going to show him how to use it. So that's why I think the floor is raised just a little bit. The New York Giants, they tagged Saquon, they brought back Daniel Jones, they brought back Darius Slayton, and then they signed Bobby Okereke from the Colts. Starting with Saquon, they tagged him. I think that's probably the best route. Running backs just shouldn't get paid anymore, really. So tagging him, keeping him around one more year, seeing if he can actually continue being healthy. And if he does, then you award him with a contract. But right now, that's probably as good as it needs to be for him and for the team. Then Darius Slayton. Slayton was a good receiver. He's a number 2, though. He's the one for the Giants, but he is a number 2 receiver. 2 years, $12 million, though. I think that's a great number. Only paying him $6 million a year. That means you can probably go get more receivers. They have to get more people in that room. There is nobody there. And if you want Daniel Jones to be able to do anything with that offense, you've got to expand. Then Daniel Jones, 4 years, 160, massive overpay. They're going to regret that. However, I believe there is a solid out year after maybe year 2. So do with that what you will. Bobby Okereke, paying him $10 million a year is a steal. He's a tackle machine. He did so well for the Colts, and now he's going to really shore up that defense for them. I think that's a great deal for them, and it's not an overpay at all. It's probably slightly under what I kind of thought he might get. Sorry. With that said, they get I'm going to give them really, that stuff. Honestly, I'm going to give them a C+. I like tagging Saquon. I like the numbers for Okereke and Slayton, but with how much you pay Daniel Jones, I mean, he's Daniel Jones. I don't think he's the worst quarterback, and I think you can do fine with him and Brian Daboll, but you can't pay him that much money. You just can't. So that's going to take them all the way down to a C+. Yeah. The Jaguars, all they've done is tagged Evan Ingram. The Jets. They have signed Wes Schweitzer from the Commanders. They signed Allen Lazard, and they're going to trade for Aaron Rodgers. Probably, maybe, I think so. Schweitzer is a solid center. I don't know who. I think it's Connor McGovern, or is he somewhere else? I don't remember. Either way, the Jets, offensive linemen are just needed anyways. I don't know who their starter is right now, but like I said, you need offensive linemen. So if they don't have a center, if it's not McGovern, I feel like he's somewhere else now, but I can't think of where. Yeah, it's fine though. Allen Lazard, they probably overpaid him a little bit. That was kind of the number a lot of receivers went at. He got an extra year, but I think that was a swing to get Rodgers, which it definitely was. And then the Rodgers trade, people are talking bad about Rodgers right now, and I'm not necessarily all in favor of supporting Rodgers, but this is not him holding up the trade or anything. He's already approved it. He mentioned that on the Pat McAfee show the other day. We're waiting on the Packers to agree to something, and they're trying to get as much as they can out of them, which they don't have a whole lot of leverage because they don't have to trade him, but you can't take that cap number into the year with you. So they're going to trade him, I think it'll be for probably just the first round pick. The Jets have at 13, but not sure entirely, but it'll happen probably very soon. With that said, I mean, if they get Rodgers, I'm going to give them a B+ because this isn't a whole lot. Rodgers is a great signing, a huge upgrade, and that jumps them all the way from maybe playoffs to maybe a contender in the NFL. And that's a huge maybe, but they have the defense. They have the weapons in Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore if they don't have to give them up. And honestly, I think if you have Allen Lazard on the outside, Garrett Wilson on the other side, and then Elijah Moore in the middle, that's a really solid room. You're going to get Breece Hall back. You have Mekhi Becton. They really could do something if they can just come together and get this done. But with that said, I think that's got to give them a solid grade. So the A- is, I think, where I'm going to sit. But the Detroit Lions brought in Cam Sutton, David Montgomery, and Emmanuel Mosley, and they brought back Alex Anzalone. They really needed cornerback help, and I thought they were going to go at that through the draft, getting either Devin Witherspoon or maybe Christian Gonzalez, but they've taken now 2 guys out, and they paid Sutton pretty well, which I think he deserved. He was really solid for Pittsburgh the last 2 years, and was really their CB1. And so for 11 mil for a CB1 ain't that bad. And then Mosley's a solid player as well. Only 6 mil, but for 1 year, that's fine. David Montgomery, I think that is a steal of a number. He had a lot of production behind a really bad offensive line. He averaged about 3.9 yards per carry, which isn't the greatest, but when you have a bad offensive line and you can't really play to a guy like him, not his strengths. He is a more of a power back with a lot of contact balance, and I mean that's fine. It's going to help him get through that line, but if you have a solid offensive line like the Lions do, maybe the best in the league, a guy like him is going to get probably like 5 yards, 6 yards a carry. It would seem like so. That's going to be a good ad. And then you have DeAndre Swift for the change of pace. That's going to be dirty. They brought it back, Alex Anzalone. He's a solid player, and I think that's a fine contract to put him on. So overall, I'm gonna give them a B plus. It's good, but they didn't make any splash signings. I don't think none of these are elite players. So they are good for sure, but they're not elite. So that's where I'm gonna leave them a B plus. The Packers. They have made no signings. They'll probably get the Jets' first-round pick. The Panthers have signed Miles Sanders, they've signed Von Bell, and they've signed Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst is a massive overpay, I think. I mean, not massive. 725 a year. It's okay. You probably could have gotten away with paying him 4 or 5. I don't really feel like the market for Hayden Hurst was all that big, especially when guys like Gesicki went for 4 mil or something to the Patriots. And Gesicki is a better athlete than he is, so not that means he's a better player, but he might be. Either way, yeah, that's an overpay. Von Bell for 3 for 22.5. I mean, that's fine. I don't mind that. Him and Jeremy Chin will probably be a pretty hard-hitting duo back there, so that'll be interesting to see. And then Miles Sanders, they traded Christian McCaffrey, so they had to bring in somebody, and I think Miles Sanders is a really good back. And I don't think they paid him too much at all. That's a really team-friendly deal in my opinion. Only paying him like 6-7 mil a year. So yeah, I'm a fan of that amount of money right there. So I think the Panthers, I'm gonna give them a B plus as well. I think they would probably get an A, honestly, if they didn't give him Hayden Hurst that much money. If it was more like 3 years, 15, 16 mil, I'd probably give him an A. But the B plus, that's too big of a contract for him. So the Patriots, they brought in the gritty god and Mike Gesicki, TikTok boy and Juju Smith-Schuster, and they brought back Jonathan Jones. I like saying that. It's the Patriots. Sorry. No, I love Juju. I hate that he went to the Patriots. Not gonna lie, but I like that he got paid. That's a good number for him, honestly, and I really think that's a good deal for him. I think he deserves that much money. He's a sure-handed wide receiver. He's not the fastest. He's not the biggest. He's not the strongest, but he's so sure-handed. And Jacoby Myers put out some stuff because he thought he was slighted by not getting paid that much. Jacoby Myers is a slot receiver who only really does anything with his route running. Juju is, he's a slot receiver, but he can play on the outside because of his size. He's a great run blocker, maybe one of the best receiving run blockers in the league. He's a really solid player. And then Jonathan Jones bringing him back, they got to have some corners back there, and he's been a fine player, so I don't mind that. I really think they got to steal with the Gesicki contract. He's a really good player. Sure, he's going to be their tight end too, but get 2 tight ends on the field and let Mac Jones cut up some defenses with some more safety. I like that pretty good. So I think I'm going to give them an A- so far, honestly. I really do. Maybe I'm being too generous. I'm going to give them a B. B+. We'll go with B+. Juju's a solid player. Gesicki's a solid player. Jonathan Jones is somebody they needed in positional value. So, I'll give them a B+. There's not enough splash for me to give them an A, but the Raiders, they have signed Jimmy Garoppolo, Marcus Epps, Jacoby Myers, Robert Spillane, and they brought back on the franchise tag Josh Jacobs. Marcus Epps is a really solid rotational safety for the Eagles. Deserved a contract. Raiders gave it to him. Robert Spillane really showed out at the end of the year for the Steelers. He stepped in, took Devin Bush's minutes pretty much completely, and played really good in them. He's a pretty solid, balanced running linebacker. Wow. He He's hard hitting, but he can also cover a little bit, which is just not completely the most normal thing. So it's a pretty solid signing, I think, there. Jacoby Myers, I think he probably got a little more money than he should have. Maybe 7, 8 mil a year, maybe 10 tops. But I mean, 11 mil a year, it's not crazy overpay, but it's not the best. Makes me wonder if they're going to end up cutting Hunter Renfrow or what they're going to do, because I see them as kind of the same player, and I just don't know there. Jimmy Garoppolo, I really like that signing. They're not going to be able to get a quarterback in this draft, in my opinion. If they do, it'll be Will Levis, who may not be ready for the field. And so getting Jimmy, he's a guy who can win. I mean, he's not going to lead you to wins, but he can help you get 2 wins. If that makes sense. So he's not going to do it himself, but he's not going to be the reason you lose necessarily. But yeah, I think that's a pretty solid contract, and I think there is an out either after this year or next year. So if they have a young guy who comes in and really plays well, they don't have any ties to him. Josh Jacobs on the tag, really like that. He was a really good running back this year, but like I said for Saquon, running backs just shouldn't get paid anymore. Tagging him is probably the safest bet. Overall, I think this is a really good offseason for what they had to do. And so I'm going to give them an A-. Not splash signings, but they've made a lot of signings, and they've hit a lot of places they might have needed. And I think the Jimmy contract is good. I think the Epps and Jacobs and Spillane contracts are very fair for the team. So I'm going to give them an A- at that. Neither of these teams have done anything in free agency. All they've done is make Lamar Jackson sad. And I don't. Some people think there's collusion going on with the NFL, everybody hating on Lamar. I don't think so. I think there's a few things here. In my opinion, the owners were mad when Jimmy Haslam decided to pay Deshaun Watson a fully guaranteed contract, and they all decided collectively together that this will never happen again, and they'll never do that again. So it's fair for Lamar to expect that maybe he should get more money than that. Maybe he should get more money because Deshaun did, and that was a market reset. Well, that's a great assumption until the owners decide they're never going to do that again, and I think that's what happened. Also, Lamar Jackson is a very good football player, a very good football player. He's not a very good quarterback. He is a very specific quarterback that has very specific needs, and I think if you're going to cater to his needs, you have to have a whole team in place for him already. There's not a whole lot of teams who do. I think the Ravens have it. The 49ers would be filthy if they were able to get him. Detroit could do it. Atlanta could probably, if they make a few moves. That's about it. I don't think the Jets with Lamar would be that good. I think they'd be better with Aaron Rodgers. The Jets don't have the kind of weapons that Lamar needs. You need a tight end, which the Lions don't have either, but they could get that in the draft for sure. Dalton Kincaid's right there at 18, no doubt. Maybe Michael Mayer if the Packers don't take him. Either way, you have to have a tight end for Lamar. You have to have a guy who's very sure-handed, very safe, and is over the middle, because Lamar can't throw outside. If you go to the Jets with Lamar, Garrett Wilson is not going to be happy with that. There's a reason why Rashad Bateman didn't work out in Baltimore, and it's because Lamar Jackson can't get the ball to him. Marquise Goodwin, same thing. So that just is what it is. Jamal Williams and Nathan Shepard have gone to the Saints, as well as Derek Carr. I think Nathan Shepard's a fine rotational player. He'll probably start. They have a lot of holes there on their defensive line. And then Jamal Williams is, I mean, I'm surprised they got him for $4 million a year. He was a touchdown machine last year. And with Kamara probably not going to be around for at least some of the season, that's a really very good signing. Derek Carr, bringing in an actual quarterback to play quarterback. I mean, Jameis Winston, okay. Andy Dalton, I'm an Andy Dalton fan-ish. I don't think he's the best quarterback, but he is definitely better than the hate he gets. But Derek Carr is a real quarterback. He is probably a top 10 quarterback. The back end of that maybe, but a top 10 nonetheless. And I think with that signing and Jamal Williams, they get an A flat A, better than most other teams, because Derek Carr is a real quarterback, and then you get a guy to replace Alvin Kamara if you have to, and if he's not having to replace him, well, they're scoring a touchdown every time they hit the red zone, because Jamal Williams is just going to run over somebody and get in. So that's an A. The Seattle Seahawks brought in Julian Love, Draymond Jones, Devin Bush, and Jaron Reed. Um, Jaron Reed's a solid rotational guy. He's going to help them up front for sure. They needed that really bad. I kind of had them taking like a guy like Brian Bresee in the first round, maybe at the back end at 20 or so, and that's going to really maybe move their mark from there. Draymond Jones as well had a really good year last year, really good run stopper. That's something they've needed as well. So maybe slight overpay for a guy who hasn't had a couple years of production. Had one really good year and a couple decent years, but not horrible. Definitely not the worst. They had like a 17 mil AAV, average annual contract, and uh, Julian Love's a solid player as well. He's talked a little trash, and so I don't know if that had anything to do on his way out. Probably didn't, but it's just kind of funny. And they got Devin Bush. Excuse me. Uh, Devin Bush has a lot of potential that he just never touched, and sayonara. With that said, I'm gonna give them a B minus. The signing of Draymond Jones is good, but the rest of it is really just rotational. None of these are standout players at all, really. Draymond Jones is the closest they got, and that gives them the B, honestly, alone. So I'll give them a B. I'll give them a B. Say it's okay, but it could be better. The Steelers brought in Nate Herbig, Cole Holcomb, Landon Roberts, and Patrick Peterson, and they re-signed Larry Ogunjobi. Patrick Peterson at $7 million a year. I really like that. A solid number. Yes, I'm a Steelers fan. I'm not just gonna say all this is good because honestly, I'm probably more critical of Pittsburgh in a way. But Patrick Peterson at $7 million a year is great. If you had to pay Cam Sutton 11 and Patrick Peterson 7, if you're really trying to gear up for the future and just kind of have some success now, but also be able to train for the future. Peterson also talked about it in his intro interview. He can mentor guys in a great way. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, so that's a great signing. Landon Roberts, 2 for 7. He's going to hit you in the mouth, but that's about it. I mean, he's a fine player. I like it when you see those captain patches on their jerseys of their former teams. It shows they have some good leadership. And him and Cole Holcomb both are really physical. I feel like that's the biggest difference. Devin Bush and Miles Jack, who was cut, were both really more athletic linebackers that kind of did a little bit of everything. These guys are definitely a change of pace. They are both going to be very physical, and they're going to hit you in the face. I mean, I watched some Cole Holcomb tape whenever he signed, and him hitting Derrick Henry was just art. It was beautiful. He's a really solid guy. I think Cole Holcomb's a really good signing. That number too. We were paying Miles Jack the same for 2 years, and now we're paying him for 3 years at that number. That's about what, 6 a year. I'm happy with that. Larry Ogunjobi was a pretty big overpay. I think that's like close to 9. That's over 9 a year. It's fine, but I don't think he warrants that kind of money. I think maybe they paid a little more just to make sure he stayed. I think he was good in the locker room, and he had made some good friends in the locker room. I think that also helped him out, getting to know guys like Cam Hayward. But is he worth over 9 a year? Probably not. Probably closer to 6 or 7. So that's an overpay. It's gonna hurt. Nate Herbig hasn't done a whole lot. I don't know much to say about him. He was a rotational player for Philly and then the Jets. He's fine, but that's about it. Overall, I'm gonna give us the Steelers a B. I'll give them a B. Larry Ogunjobi, I mean, they needed his position, but not that bad. And then I think Cole Holcomb and Patrick Peterson are really good signings. And then Landon Roberts in the replacement of Devin Bush or whatever you want to call it, maybe Miles Jack. That's a solid move. But Herbig, he's been okay. I think the last couple years he could maybe come in and fight for that left guard spot with Kevin Dotson, but we'll have to wait and see. But honestly, like I said, there'd be the biggest Steelers win. This could push them to an A. The Houston Texans have brought in Sheldon Rankins, Robert Woods, and Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward's old. I don't know if that's. I mean, that's a fine contract. It could be worse, but he went there because D'Amico Ryans went down there. So whatever. Stay with his coach, his guy. But Sheldon Rankins, 1 year, 10 mil, pretty solid signing. I mean, he's a solid player, but nothing elite there. And then Robert Woods, 2 years, 15 million. I think that's a little more than I expected him to get, but once again, like Atlanta, like Chicago, when you have money and you don't have a roster, you got to overpay guys to get them there. And Robert Woods is on the tail end of his career now. I mean, he's a fine player for sure. Was Tennessee's number 1 last year, but he'll probably be Houston's number 1 this year. But you know, what's that, 7 some change a year. I mean, it's okay. I think he'll be fine there. He'll have a couple good years. He might retire after this contract. I don't know, but overall, I'm gonna give him a B minus. It's not a great offseason. They got three pretty old-ish guys. I mean, I don't know how old Robert Woods. I think he's like 29. Sheldon Rankins is, I think, 30, and Ward is 32 or 33. But not a great group, but it's fine. I mean, they're positional needs, so I'll give them a B minus. They might give a C plus, but whatever. Tennessee Titans. They have signed Aziz Al Shair. They signed Arden Key, and they got Andre Dillard. Excuse me. Andre Dillard. That's a pretty decent contract. He played well for the Eagles. Maybe a little overpaid though. Arden Key. That's probably a pretty fair contract. He played well for the Jaguars, and I mean he was drafted pretty high back in the day. I don't remember where, but that's he's shown out later in his career. A bit of a late bloomer. Not the best player, but definitely decent. And another guy that they needed off of losing Bud Dupree. And so I think this offseason for them has been a little rough. They did lose Nate Davis as well. Sumalo is an okay replacement, but I mean, if you're going to pay him that much, unless Nate Davis just wanted to leave, why not pay that same amount, even a little more, to Nate Davis, who's definitely a little better than him? Overall, I'm going to give them a C plus. It's okay. It's not really, nothing stands out about it, so it's whatever. And the Vikings. The Vikings brought back Alexander Madison. They brought back their center. What's his name? Garrett Bradbury is their center. They brought back Alexander Madison. They brought in Josh Oliver. And then Marcus Davenport and Byron Murphy. This was a team that had some heavy defensive issues last year. And Davenport on a 1-year deal for $13 million. Great signing. Didn't have the best year, but we've seen it from him before. So really solid, prove it move. And then Byron Murphy, a solid corner who they lost Patrick Peterson. They had to do something, and they're gonna get Andrew Booth back next year. Made the defense a lot younger too. So some good signings on the defense, I think. They did lose Eric Kendrick, so I wonder what they're gonna do there in the middle. But then bringing back 2 guys, and then bringing in Josh Oliver, who is a solid tight end to be tight end to. It's a bit of $7 million a year is a lot of money for tight end too behind Hawkinson, but if that's what they're going for, that's what they're going for. I think this is a pretty solid offseason for them, though, mainly because of those 2 defensive signings, and then bringing back a solid center, and then also Alexander Madison at that number. Dalvin Cook still might be a cap casualty at the season mark, so him for only $3.5 million, who's been a really, really solid back and done a lot of good whenever Dalvin Cook's been out. I think that's a really good collection right there. I'm gonna give them an A minus. I mean, maybe not the best players, but I like the numbers they came in at. They did really good on that note, getting the numbers right. So yeah, an A minus for them. So that's going to be it for this video. If you like this video, let me know how you feel in the comments. Like it. Please subscribe. Like I said, the channel's kind of been blowing up a little bit lately. Don't know why. Haven't really done much, but I'm really thankful for it, This is something that I love doing, and I'm going to try to keep doing it as much as I can. So thank y'all for watching, and peace.